Thank you both very much. I think listening to both of you and looking at your work, what comes across to me is whether the struggle for rights, be they gay or gender, LGBT, whether the battle has been won or not, because many feel that they need to keep shouting, pushing with language, because they feel, for example, there is not equality in whatever sphere it is that we might want to talk about. So that could be gay rights, that could be women's rights, that could be racial justice. How do you feel, Douglas, when we talk about that? Do you feel, when I read your book, it came across to me that you feel a lot of the battles were almost won?
Well, I do. I use this analogy that in many of these areas, it's been my experience in my adult life that it's looked like watching a train reaching the desired destination, that is, at the station of equality. And as it draws in, suddenly getting ahead of steam, shooting off down the tracks, off the tracks, and scattering people in its wake. What I mean by that is the weaponization of things at the stage at which they've never got better, where they're presented as if they've never been worse. And I just urge people to take their foot off that pedal a little bit. That isn't to say don't keep moving, but don't lean on heuristics you've come to very recently this hard.
Silvana.
So what I'd like to focus here, rather than on Douglas's remarks, if I may, is the remarks that was begun at the very beginning by the moderator, which I think many of you probably missed. She started out by talking that as I've looked at the works that both of you have done, and things that you've written, if you go back and you hear what she says, I think that is a huge slight to Douglas Murray, folks. Because when I did a little bit of research to find out who this Sylvana Simons is, as far as I can tell, how she rose to the prominence, and I use that in quotes, that she has in the Netherlands, is that she has absolutely no business being, well, if you want to get as a leftist Marxist socialist, you don't have to have any ideas. You don't have to have any background. You don't have to have any history of a job or any history of experience or nothing like that. As long as you tick off the boxes: female, check; black, check; leftist, check; Marxist, check; for transgenderism, check; for gay rights, check; LGBTQIA, MOUSE, check; intersectionality, check; identity politics, check. As long as you check off those boxes and you have any work history, nothing at all. Schooling, probably not. Who knows? Not needed. Sylvana basically was a hairdresser, a hairstylist. And then she got a job on some entertainment show, sort of like a MC type of thing. And then from there, basically got all these leftist, loony ideas and parlayed that into, something into the Dutch parliament or whatever. So that's the background history of Sylvana. She has absolutely no business being there up on stage. And you can see that. We got a video. The links are up there to the opening statements of this Sky News special debate between Douglas and Sylvana. And the opening statements, that was just absolutely, I don't even know what that was, what she was talking about. But if you take it back, Douglas Murray, how many books has this man written? How many speeches has this man given? How many world leaders has this man talked to? How many debates has this man been in? In comparison, it's not even there. She shouldn't even be sharing the stage with this man. And I don't care if I'm mansplaining to this woman or not. Although I digress, we shouldn't be taking anybody's gender for their, my bad. Anyways, let's get back to Sylvana's response to the question asked by the moderator. We'll go to that clip right now.
Well, I always think it's necessary to really understand that even though my emancipation has reached a certain level where I can say that I now have certain privileges, it doesn't mean to say that that goes for everybody who's part of, let's say, that particular group that's identifying within a certain scope. So let's make it more concrete and say that it's fine if you're a female exec, like myself, for instance. I'm a female party leader. So it's easy for me to say that that's doable, that's possible. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
That is so true. But now I bet you she's going to say that's not possible because there's no equality of outcome. All you need is all we need is what? Equality of opportunity. Everybody has an opportunity. That's it. You've got to decide, okay, how you make your own outcome come to fruition.
But the fact of the matter is that a lot of young women who look like me do not have the same privileges and are still fighting so many battles that maybe I've overcome because of, Lord knows why, could be just my, my dominant character.
Or it just could be the reason that because you're black, you're leftist, you're Marxist, and you don't have any experience of any kind, but it fills exactly the thing that they were looking for in the job application that you were doing for Parliament. Because let's face it, not too many intelligent people, a lot of people that aren't so intelligent, they're the ones that are going into politics. There's very few politicians that have brains. Most of them have nothing, like this lady, completely vacuous.
But it's not to say that they have the same opportunities and the same privileges. So they still have a long way to go. And I know from experience that it's important for them to have role models and people that speak out on their behalf.
Well, let me pass it back to Douglas then. Do you feel you can always speak as freely as you want to?
Myself, yes. I think that I'm in as it were, a very privileged position. I know this from audiences and readers who are in touch with me, that increasingly the things I describe which have caused career destruction for very eminent people. I mean, thinking of things like the Nobel Prize-winning scientist Tim Hunt, who made this one joke at a conference in Korea, and by the time he'd landed in London, he lost every job he had. I'm saying this has happened to very prominent people. They've either said something that's not that popular anymore, or said something off-color, and so on and so forth. But my point is that all of that stuff trickles down to the workplace. And what I'm struck by now is the extent to which people who are not self-employed journalists and writers feel that they can't say the things that some people in public can say. So, for instance, let me give one very quick example. I did this on the BBC the other week, that this issue came up with this pop singer Sam Smith, who described himself as non-binary. And I got into a certain amount of trouble that didn't bother me, but because I said I don't think there's any such thing, or at least no one's explained what it is sufficiently for me to agree to it. Now, I know from feedback, including feedback in the studio from certain people at the BBC, that this is not an unpopular thing to say. I would think that if you went out to the general public and said, do you think there are people who are non-binary, and if so, can you say what they are? You'd get a fragment of 1% of people able to say that. And so my point on that is not that I've closed the argument on that, but we haven't had the argument on a whole set of things.
Just look at her. Look at her. She's stewing. Silvana is stewing. She's simmering, folks. SIMR. My acronym for stupid, idiotic, moronic, retarded. I'm sorry, but she's already suing because all Douglas said was could somebody sufficiently, for crying out loud, for Pete's sakes, for the love of God, just explain to me in simple to easy use words, what the hell do you mean by I'm non-binary or I'm binary? Just explain it to me with some easy words. That's all. But even if you bring that thing up to even question the fact that, what the hell do you mean that you're non-binary? What the hell do you mean that you're binary? You're both at the same time. You're binary and non-binary at the same time. You bring that up, uh-oh, you're a heretic, uh-oh, you're a non-binary phobe, you're a binary phobe, you're a racist, you're a bigot, bigot. Immediately. That's exactly what's going through her mind. Exactly what's going through her mind right now. Douglas Murray, privileged white guy, rich, famous, done all this work of which I don't have anything comparable to, but he's white, he's privileged, and he's bringing up non-binary. Oh my goodness, he's going to scare so many people. He's hurting me, or he's triggering everybody around the world. They're being triggered because, Douglas Murray, he said, they're just asking about, explain binary, non-binary. Oh my goodness. Let's continue.
And it seems only to be a few people who do have a voice in public who can have it.
Silvana, you're nodding your head, not in agreement.
Because I'm always surprised that certain people feel that they need to give their okay for other people to be or think something they don't necessarily understand. It doesn't matter whether I understand the beauty of physical love between two men. There's no point. You don't need my permission to feel and act. So why does Sam Smith or anybody else who considers himself non-binary needs permission from whoever? All that is up to us is to say, if this is important to you and it does not affect me in any type of way, in any type of negative way, I'm going to respect that. So if you say that you're offended by blackface every year, then I don't need to understand how come you're offended. All I need to do is say, this is not my intention. How can I fix it? And if you say you can fix it by stop acting that way, then that's what I'll do, because there is no point. People don't need your permission to be whoever they want to be.
Can I?
Before Douglas answers, I want to just step in here. This is exactly what leftists do. This is exactly what the transgender movement do. The Church of Transgenderism, the Church of Climatology, the Greta Thunbergs of the world for climatology, Silvana here for obviously transgenderism and LGBTQIA, MOU, SE rights, all of that. Because she says, you don't need anybody's permission to do what you want. You can act the way that you do. Nobody has to give you an okay. As long as you're not hurting anybody, as long as you're not telling anybody what to do. That would be perfectly fine if this was the real world, but it's not. It's bizarro world. And what happens is that that's not what they're saying. That's Sam Smith. He's going to say, listen, I'm binary, and you better damn well accept that I'm binary. And say it. Say that I'm binary. Say that I'm non-binary. And tell everybody else. And if you don't say it, then guess what? You're hurting my feelings. You're a phobe. You're a bigot. You're a racist. You're anti-transgender. That's what happens. Not only do they want to live their life that way, which is perfectly fine, let them do it. Don't let it bleed into the normalcy of human endeavor, into human life, into things that we've already known for thousands of years. And don't force us to say things or make us believe things that we know are not to be true. You want to believe that crap? You want to believe the delusion? Go perfectly fine ahead and believe it. But don't expect us to follow along. That's what we're talking about.
I think it's slightly more complex than that, if I can say so.
Yes.
One reason why. Actually, the Sam Smith thing was significant. Again, sorry to go on about the BBC. The BBC's reporting of that immediately did what he asked, which was that they changed the pronouns. And some people think this isn't a big thing. Some of us do get a bit stuck on this.
I'm only interrupt you just so everybody is up to speed with the sense of instead of he, she, him, her, non-binary people often want to use they, them. So it would be...
So my point was simply that if you haven't actually had this out in public, you haven't actually discussed much of it, it's a bit strange that a major news organization would slip into saying exactly what a person had asked themselves to be described as simply because they had asked for it.
Sounds like respect to me.
It's not
nothing
the same,
more, nothing less.
It's not the same thing as respect because it's something which we haven't had out. He himself said, I don't know what it means to be non-binary.
So
my suggestion was he should go away and think about it. And in the meantime, we shouldn't all mutilate the language to fit around him.
Why? If I come on this stage and I say to you, I would prefer for you to call me Mr. Simons, why is it a problem to you to just give me that respect?
But what...
It's not about respect, lady. It's not about respect, for crying out loud. It's not about respect. It's about delusion. Why would I become an acronym that I talk about? Why would I start to simmer? SIMR. SIMR. Why would I decide to act stupid? Why would I decide to act idiotic? Why would I decide to act moronic? Why would I decide to act retarded? If you came on and said, call me mister. I mean, if you ask nicely, yeah. But no, you're not a mister. You're a female. XX. All right? Don't tell me to do things and say things and believe things that are not true to form in nature. We're not in a paradox, in a paradox dimension where everything's the opposite. We're not watching the series Flash here, folks. We're not in DC comic world. Although sometimes you believe when you wake up in the morning, you probably think that, you know what, maybe we are in a comic bizarro matrix world right now with the way things are going. But this lady here, so if I were to tell her and say, you know what, she would probably say, that's fine. If I say, I want to be a female black woman. That's what I want to be. Address me now as a female black woman and let me get all the rights and privileges that a female black woman gets. She's probably going to say, nothing wrong with that. I'll do that. But what would happen if I were to take her place in Parliament? Because I said I'm a female black woman and I was elected. I wonder how she would feel then, Silvana. Anyways, let's continue.
Well, I'm afraid that because I care about the language, I didn't particularly want to say they was very good in their performance last night.
Well,
I'm not going to do it simply because of the... Now, there is a more important thing, if I may say so.
Sure,
which is that actually this one is a very niche bit of a thing. Whether a pop star thinks they're non-binary or genderqueer or whatever is not that significant. Now, there is one that's very significant, which we're all tripping over now, which is the trans one. And you mentioned the thing about the phobia there. There is a real problem in our societies on this one, because actually in the media, people are petrified now of writing about this issue. But outside there in the country, as you can see from a new poll that's about to come out tomorrow, the general public are deeply concerned about being dismissed as transphobes when you're talking about how you deal with children. And that isn't a small concern. It's not just about pronouns. It's a legitimate concern of the general public about the well-being of children.
Yes.
I'm bothered when people make assertions which we haven't litigated in public yet. And on a whole set of issues at the moment, look, the way I see it is, I'm sure you're all people who've seen sheepdogs in operation, but if you see a sheepdog trying to get a herd of sheep, it doesn't need to go and force them into a corner. It goes and not even nips, but pretends to nip around the edges, and that way you can make everyone move like this. There is a real and significant risk in our society with the free press at the moment that people coming and making very slight nips around the edges make the whole herd move in another direction, and that is exactly what's happened with this.
What are you worried about will be the end result?
I'm worried that we tell little lies and we get
Yes.
used to little lies and then
They're
we tell
big
bigger
lies. They're not little
I think
lies. They
there's
turn to
I think
big
it's
lies.
a lie to pretend that biology doesn't matter. I think
Yes.
it's unwise to pass those things through always simply because of courtesy. Courtesy, I happen to agree, is one of the bedrocks of society. It's very important to be courteous, but that's not. Courtesy has a limit, and the limit is
I didn't use
when
the
it
word
makes
courtesy.
people.
I used the word respect, and there's a big difference between courtesy and respect. Respect is what we absolutely need in order to live together on this planet.
Wrong, wrong, wrong. Respect has to be earned, for crying out loud. You don't get it. You can give respect to somebody that earns it. You get respect by earning it. You don't claim it. You don't force it from somebody. You don't force somebody to respect you. You earn that respect. This lady has no idea what she's talking about. None.
As a diverse society, something that is hard to accept for certain people, but we are a diverse society. What we see happening is new perspectives coming in.
Oh, my
new,
God.
People saying we want to have our seat at the table because we can either represent ourselves or, as myself, have been given the mandate to represent certain groups of people. Now, those same people who for decades, if not hundreds of years, have been the dominant factor in deciding what is on the table.
In other words, white people, privileged white people at the table. That's what she's talking about.
Are afraid. I do understand. I don't understand what they're afraid of. I think I do, but I'd like to hear from them. And also, I don't understand why it is of such importance to them that other people emancipate in the way they think is best.
If I may just put one thing on the end of that. On the diversity issue, I entirely agree, of course. I mean, our societies are trying to cope with a very swift increase in diversity of the kind that we've been talking about.
There's always been diversity. There's
like
always
this.
been diversity. There's always been black people, Asian people, people of different genders, people of different sexual
of course
preferences.
There's been some.
Always have been around.
Just one at a time, though, so we can.
Of course there's been some, but I'm saying not like this. And we are struggling with it. And I would suggest there's a useful lesson for speech in this from a very good book by the Danish journalist Flemming Rose, who wrote a book called The Tyranny of Silence a few years ago. And he made a point that I think is just worth us bearing in mind, which is, he said, in his view, that there were only two ways you could go with dealing with an increasingly diverse society. You, broadly speaking, had the choice of limiting speech or having to get people used to the fact there'd be more speech than they'd ever been used to before. And of the two, the latter, despite how painful it is far more preferable. I think the interesting thing about the whole issue of offence is not the problem with the claiming of offence is that it is not that it is obviously sometimes people, a lot of the time, people say things that are offensive. Happens to most of us every day. But the problem is not that. The problem is the use of "I'm offended by that" as effectively a synonym for "shut up." That is commonplace, and that just needs some pushing back. My suggestion, for going from what somebody said at Vox a little while ago, was why don't we try to start working out, as an interim measure, listening to each other's words and trying to hear them honestly.
But why don't we start thinking about what we say and what we do before? Why don't we start there? Why don't we take responsibility for the things we say and do before we offend
I agree,
people?
but my suggestion is, I say, that if we could do this, if we could practice it across lines, it would mean that we try to listen to other people in a spirit of generosity. And what we're doing at the moment is deliberately listening to people in the hope that there is something underneath the words that we can work out and we can... So my suggestion is just start with that. But I'm so glad you raised it because it's the single most unaddressed question in our society that needs addressing.
It's been fascinating. You have listened to each other and you've spoken to one another, so
And
this
we
is
haven't
wonderful.
killed each other. How about that?
Thank you all for your questions
Thank
as
you.
well. Thanks to Douglas and to Silvana.
Thank you. Thank you.
So some parting thoughts. Now, they were very civil to each other, unlike I sort of did get a little bit rowdy and rant a little bit here. But that's okay. That's perfectly fine. But they were pretty civil to each other. But if you notice, in terms of domination of talk, it was pretty much Douglas Murray, I'd say 75% of the time. Douglas was the one that was talking. And then he's bringing up different quotations from books and different authors and putting the perspective together. And he finally basically said, of course people offend each other. Of course offenses are occurring, sometimes deliberately and sometimes just completely, they don't mean to offend, but then people will start to say, oh, that meant something. That's triggering me. Oh, you meant something by that. And that can be a way to effectively tell people, you better shut up, because if you open your mouth again, you might say something wrong, and you don't want to get in trouble, or you don't want to feel, that you did something wrong, or you don't want the wrath of people or people looking at you or whatever. So you just decide to cower and back away and don't say anything, and eventually that stifles the free speech that Douglas is talking about. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasser Sheikh Show. I've been your host, Dr. Nasser. If you haven't done so already and we've earned it and you like what you saw, subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow us. You know what to do. Take a look at our various other video links above and below in our video list on our page on YouTube. And I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.